Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to go over the process of making my Princess in the Pauper dress that I made for Ren Fair and Halloween this year. Me and my friend did a lot of this together, so there's not a lot of footage of me making this dress, but I still wanted to go over all of the layers and pieces that went into making this dress. The first step was making the base layer, the chemise. I do actually have a video of making this part of the dress and where I got the pattern from and all of those little details if you want to go check it out. But from that video to this one, I did end up cutting the sleeves quite a bit, and I prefer them much more this way than I did with the long sleeves. It's just much more comfortable and breathable, and it fit better with the costume. The next step was, of course, the corset, or in this case, a pair of stays. Out of everything, this is probably the part that we spent the most time making, but it was absolutely worth that extra time because the fit was perfect, they were extremely comfortable to wear, and they were crucial to making that iconic shape we wanted our dresses to have. We took our pattern from this book, and I have found that I prefer to go down a size or two when it comes to these corsets so I can get that gap in the back where the lacing is. If I use my actual measurements to pick the size in this book, I have found that the corset closes all the way, which just wasn't what I was going for here. Other than that though, there wasn't any other sizing or adjustments that I had to make to the pattern to make this fit properly. After the corset, we of course had to make petticoats. Originally, we were planning on making crinoline instead of tulle petticoats. For these dresses specifically, the goal was a more historically accurate, inspired Princess in the Pauper dress, and crinoline would have followed that trend a little bit more closely than petticoats, but since this was also Barbie and petticoats were a little bit cheaper, we ended up going that route instead. For the tulle petticoats, we did not end up using a set pattern. Other than the pattern that I drafted myself for the waistband, we ended up using this waistband pattern on all of the skirt layers. This was mostly for simplicity's sake. This method of skirt closure was common at this point in history, and it saved us time on the making process. For the actual tulle part of this skirt, it was simple enough to just gather, cut to length, gather again, stitch to the bottom section of the skirt, and just repeat that until we had the full floor-length skirt, as well as the fullness that we wanted around the bottom of the dress. And it worked out perfectly well for our purposes in this costume, even though it wasn't a very precise method of sewing. It was very common in this time period to have detachable pockets instead of pockets stitched directly onto the skirts or a bag, so that is the method that we went with and is our next layer. We actually ended up making these last just because we were running into a bit of a time crunch with the rest of the dress by this point, and we used a more modern, convenient method of construction for an 18th century pocket, partially so we could assemble them faster, and we also switched the vertical pocket opening to a horizontal one just to really ensure that our stuff stayed secure throughout the day. Since we were actually going to be wearing these costumes during Ren Fair, that just felt like the more secure option for us in the moment. I also added a button and an elastic closure band. This really wasn't necessary, but it gave me peace of mind. Instead of binding all of the raw edges, we used a rolled hem on the pocket opening and a French seam around the whole border of the pocket. Both pockets are then secured around the waist so that they are hidden but accessible through the overskirts. The next layer is our solid colored middle skirt. This is a simple floor-length circle skirt that we use to cover the petticoat and to give a good base layer for the overskirt. The waistband and the closure method is the same as the petticoat, and it is important to make sure that the pocket is accessible through that overlapped fabric at the sides. This is also probably the only part of the costume that can be used as a regular outfit piece, which I am very happy about, and I'm very excited to use this throughout the winter months when a longer skirt is a little bit more comfortable. Finally, we have our last main underlayer, the overskirt. For the middle skirt, we used a regular cotton, and for the overskirt, we used a shimmery and kind of sparkly organza. This was probably the worst material to work with out of this whole project just because it is so slippery under the machine. We ended up needing to add a cotton layer on the waistband just to make it less sheer. The waistband is the same as all of the other layers, but the skirt part, instead of being a circle skirt, we wanted it to be very voluminous and gathered at the top, so it is just a rectangle about 3 yards that we gathered down into the size of our waist. Due to the construction method of this, we had one seam at the very back that we closed first, and then cut about 7 to 9 inches down from the top of the waist on the sides in order to get in and out of the skirt when it's open and to give a slit for the pocket. At this point, it would be common to add a thing called a stomacher. This is normally a design that would match the rest of the dress to make it all look like one top. It would be the staple piece full of design and embroidery and anything else. Since it's at the very front part of the gown, it is very centralized. But because this is the Pauper dress and I wanted it to look more like the costume, I ended up doing a half stomacher so I could show off the corset and the chemise as part of the costume that was more accurate to her dress, even though it is not historically accurate. So I elected to make the stomacher out of the same material that I made the corset. This is so I could wear the skirts on top of the corset like it's supposed to be worn, and I can still cover up the waistband to give it a more cohesive look. The stomacher is normally held in place with pins until the overdress can be pinned into place, but for me, I elected to just pin the side so it would stay where I needed it, and then held it in place with some string on the main gown. Finally, we can add the main dress. We used this pattern from this book. I was able to use the scale on the side of this pattern to blow it up in the software that I used to make all of my patterns, and then print it out. With the pattern laid out, it became kind of obvious that it was going to be a little bit too small, but because of the nature of the pattern, how this dress works, it's all one piece that is then gathered down into the shape of the gown. It was a little hard to tell just how small it would be. Mantua gowns in general have a lot of extra fabric for pleats and darts and all of these other things that you can then adjust, so it's a very forgiving dress size-wise. So we just went ahead and took the risk, cutting it out at the size that it was, and figuring that we could make any adjustments later if it came to that, which it did. The biggest size issues we had doing it that way was the back was a little bit too tight up at the very top, it was a little too short down on the bottom hem, and the sleeve was a little bit too tight by the elbow, around the bottom of the sleeve. So how we fixed that was by reducing the amount of fabric between the pleats and stitching those down, since they would no longer have that really pretty waterfall draped effect on the back, which we weren't too hung up on either way, so that was okay. For the sleeve, we opened up a little gore triangle underneath at the very bottom of the sleeve. This allowed us to give it a little bit more width without having to recut a new sleeve entirely. And we knew we were going to be covering this with ruffles and all that extra stuff anyways, so having a little extra piece of fabric there was not going to attract any attention. And my favorite part was fixing the bottom. I think it added a lot to the gown, having this extra width of material down at the bottom. And the way we did this was essentially cutting a strip of fabric about 9 inches widthwise and with the length of the entire skirt. And the reason we picked 9 was once the seam allowance was folded over and it was folded in half, it essentially made about a 4-inch width panel that we could then stitch directly to the bottom hem of the skirt, which gave us just that extra little bit of width that we needed at the bottom in order to cover the bottom skirt. But I really like how this detail looked because it gave it an extra flair that I think it needed. I then added an extra lacing panel to the front of the gown in order to secure everything down and match the look of the costume on the original dress. And I quite preferred having lacing on my dress just because it alleviated the worry of having to deal with pins on the day of, but that's completely a style choice on my part. I also had this extra vintage strip of fabric that I was able to use that matched the dress perfectly in color and style to give that historical appeal without having to buy fabric that had that floral print on it. I don't think I would have found anything that would have matched to my need for this dress. So I was very happy that I had this in my stash in order to give that floral print on the front of the skirt. As for the extra little detail parts of this outfit, we divided our tasks. My friend ended up making the necklaces that we used for our costumes, and they just turned out so cute. And I spent my time 3D printing and assembling little fan blades so we could make some hand folding fans out of the same material that we used for the rest of our outfits. I cannot be more happy with how these outfits turned out. We've been working on them off and on for about a year now, and I have always wanted to make and wear a dress like this at some point in my life, and I cannot express just how pleased I am that it's a reality now. And of course we had a great time wearing these at Ren Fair. It was a beautiful day, a little on the hot side, but in the shade it wasn't too bad. And it was just overall really fun to be able to wear these dresses and see it come to life after all of the work we put into it. If you made it this far, thanks for listening to me chattering on about this fun little project that I did. I'm sorry I wasn't able to show you the process of making every step of this gown, but hopefully eventually I'll do another big dress like this and actually record the process and show you how it's done. But for now, this is what we have, and I'm glad I was able to at least share part of it with you. But for now, that is where I will leave it. We can head on to the reveal, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!